Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Jeremy Lee interviewed me for his Road to the National series, where I was honored to be one of the 6 people that he chose to interview about the National on behalf of the group that runs the National in terms of getting some PR and really trying to get new people to come. That was a big part of what Jeremy wanted to talk about, and we had a wide-ranging conversation. So he's a great interviewer. Always enjoy being on with him. And his episode, that is YouTube. We turn on the video. What I'm going to give you are just some outtakes from that, some brief comments, mainly me answering some of his excellent questions. We want to promote the National. We want to make it not just bigger, but better. Bigger would be great, but the bigger can be from the customers coming from all over the world who are already collectors. But I'd love to see, and so would everybody, like to see some new people. So that was kind of the main thrust of that. I had some ideas I threw out there. In fact, spoiler alert, there's a part 2. This was half of my conversation. We had an extended conversation. So please go to his site, his channel, YouTube. But this is not part of his Sports Card Live Saturday evening thing. In fact, he told me he's parsing that into Monday through Friday to turn 3+ hours into probably 5 half hours. I think that's a great idea. Jeremy's one of the good guys in the hobby. Check out his stuff. This is just the outtakes or the excerpts from an extended conversation, all of which was good. So thank you, Jeremy. Here it is. And go to the National.
Dr. Beckett, where am I most likely to find you at the National?
I am very findable now, thanks to my friends at the Singles Club. It's my office away from home. My wife understands the full connotation of that, but those guys have their own setup, and I start there because I love working the dollar boxes, and they provide a chair for me, so I spend some of the mornings there, and then I wander off from there. It's great. I love being there, but I'm not a moving target most mornings. I'm camped out.
You've been to, I believe, every single National Sports Collectors Convention. What year was the first one?
1980.
1980. So this will be your 45th or maybe 46th National Convention you will be attending. That's a lot. And the National has evolved over the years. But this year, 2025, is there something you are looking forward to see? How do you think this year will be better than last year? Maybe the best year yet?
I think the better comparison is to 2 years ago, which set records in Chicago. This one is bigger than that one. I think it'll be bigger than Cleveland as well. The Cleveland, many positives associated with that. I'm hoping it's the biggest one ever. And it really could be. Like I said, we'll have a comparison to 2 years ago, but there's 10% more booths. There's 10 or 15% more square footage. It's going to be huge. Again, I know you're laying it on thick, Jeremy, but their first point of when they walk in is not to find me. Or
some people
with my name on it. But the tricky thing for me is when I'm walking around, it's not the visual distraction of seeing my name. It's the audio, it's hearing. If I hear my name being mentioned, they're not necessarily looking for me. They're just mentioning it. But I'm fine with blending in at this point. I had a lot of prominence for a lot of years, and it's nice to just relax and chill with some friends at the National.
I appreciate that, and I respect that, but I can't promise you I won't bring a collector over to meet you who maybe wants to during the show. They want to meet the man behind the Beckett name, and they want to take a picture with you. And I know I certainly did when I first met you, and I will cherish those memories and moments. Now, back in the day, when you started Beckett Publications with the price guides, growing the hobby must have been something that was important to you. Growing the business, growing the hobby, you are a lover of the sports card collecting world. Now, the National Sports Collectors Convention itself can be an integral force in growing our hobby. Why would you advise people who might be curious about our hobby to go to the National? What do you think that they could see there that would help them become more regular hobby participants?
They're going to be overwhelmed. And overwhelmed in this sense is if you'd heard about Disney World, but you'd never been there, and then you walk into the Magic Kingdom and you're just overwhelmed. And then they say, oh, yeah, but you got to go to Epcot or you've got to go to these other. Really? In Chicago, there's more than one huge room, something off to the side that's equal to the biggest convention you've ever seen, and it's the afterthought. And then you get over here and there's this huge autograph signing areas. So it's overwhelming. I think for the majority of the people, they're going to say, hey, I was not prepared for this. I'll be better prepared next time. I think it's a rare person that says, I'm overwhelmed. I'm never coming back. I think they're going to say, this is unbelievable. It would take me all weekend, 5 days to see it all if I went over it step by step. That's the challenge the National has. It's so big for a new person. I don't know if the national organizers could do this or one of the larger entities in the industry, but just you can't play favorite to say you need to go to this booth and then you need to go to this booth. But if you just knew that there's a breaking area that has a lot of excitement, there's a stage, there's a vintage area, there's a wax area, and you could stumble on those if you just walk the perimeter. But just a little bit of assistance that, just like in Disney World, there's Adventureland and Tomorrowland. If you had a little bit of a map, not prescriptive, but just to give the new person so they don't walk in and they're overwhelmed. And if they walk in a certain door, all they're going to see for a few minutes is vintage. And that is a huge part of the hobby, but it's not the whole hobby. If they walked in a different door, they might just see mountains and mountains of unopened wax. So I think you've got to be able to circle the perimeter or get a taste of it to see, wow, there's more than I thought here, but it's overwhelming. And it'll be more overwhelming in Chicago than it ever has been.
The theme there is overwhelming. And I remember my first time walking into the National in Chicago several years ago. And it's exactly what you just described. It's overwhelmingly large. The door I walked into was the opening to the world of vintage is what it felt like, which I love looking at that. And it can be intimidating as well. You just mentioned walk the perimeter perhaps. And maybe that's a great tip for somebody who's going for the first time. But what is your best tip you could offer somebody who is going to the National for the first time here in 2025 to overcome the feeling of being overwhelmed and the intimidation of just how grand the National is?
Okay, fresh tip. Never really thought about this till you mentioned it, but if you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, if you go to the Louvre, you go to any major art, huge footprint museum, there are docents there. You can actually get somebody to walk with you and point out some things. Now, there's a fee in some cases, in many cases. But if the National had some people there, they could be younger. They could be 15 years old, and somebody comes in, they don't know what they're doing. Would you like somebody to walk with you and explain some things? And I bet a 15-year-old kid would do it, not necessarily for minimum wage, but for product, for goodies. An 18-year-old, a 25-year-old, anybody that's into it might want to say, I'd love to take a group of newbies around, and for a 2-hour tour, we walk to the back and then we come back a different way. And I've got a little microphone things they have that have earbuds, and you'd walk through in a group of 12 or something. I could see something like that.
That's an interesting idea. And I wonder if anyone has ever thought of that, but that could be certainly...
Because it's overwhelming. It'll always be overwhelming. Even if you give them a map, it's overwhelming. But if you said, hey, would you like to walk along with this kid that's really got his act together, that's been here, and maybe he's a volunteer, or maybe he's, like I say, doing it for some goodies, I bet you could do that. And you might group them by older and younger. But if you had a group of young kids and they had a kid that took them around, I think that'd be cool.
That's a wonderful business idea for somebody or the National to organize, and not even as a business, just as a service to the hobby, newcomers to the National. The usual tips: wear good shoes, pack some snacks and water with you, have things available to get you through the day. Those are all very important. Cash management, though, becomes a challenge for many people because the show is a 5-day show. It's Wednesday through Sunday. That's a long time. And if you walk through the door that very first day, you get to the very first table you look at and you see a card that you want to purchase, but it is going to use up your whole budget for the weekend. That could be very anticlimactic for somebody who has scheduled themselves to be there for the full 5 days. What would you say to somebody to get around that?
I think there's another way to look at it. I would call that success. If you walked in Wednesday and you found the card of your dreams at a price you were willing to pay that completely wiped out your funds, that's a victory. But you've got to count the cost. Now you're going to be walking around the next 4 days with nothing in your pocket unless you brought some trade material. The other aspect I will bring up, because it affects the way I hobby, is that I run out of time before I run out of money. I'm not going to run out of money. And many of the people there are not going to run out of money, but I am going to run out of time. So time is the more scarce commodity. Now, when the show's over, I can be purely social, And that's wonderful. But there's only so many hours during the show. But like I say, if somebody spent all their money on Wednesday and Thursday, if they got good deals, and that happens a lot, Jeremy, trade night is such a big deal. Even if you're not a dealer, you should be bringing trade stuff, and you could maybe replenish that night with some stuff that you brought. It's not about funding my cards. It's you bring your own Zion case of cards that you'd like to cash in or trade out. So the show can live on, even if you run out of Benjamins.
It's an interesting take you have there that you would see that as a success. And I can't disagree, especially if you're finding a grail card.
If you advise people to be patient, that could be really hurtful advice. You see the card of your dreams on Wednesday, but no, I'm going to wait. It's not going to be there on Sunday.
Exactly. I've heard a lot of people always say, walk the room, pick out the few things you might want to buy, price compare, the pros and cons, which item you're going to buy, and then go back and buy the one you want. And I say, if the card you want is that good, it might not be there within 10 minutes of you walking in and seeing it, especially early on in the show. So I like to say you kind of have to buy it when you see it. But you made a great point, Dr. Beckett, which is that you can run out of time before you run out of money, which isn't the case for everybody, but it is the case for some. But if you run out of money first, there are so many things to see at the National besides cards to purchase from showcases. In many ways, it is often a museum. Now, you have seen it all in your career. I'm guessing you've seen many things, especially in the card world. But is there anything that you are looking to see this year? Anything that would really shock you or floor you, Dr. Beckett? Think back. When you've walked the show floor, what are some of the neatest items that come to mind that you've seen historically at the National and then moving forward this year?
Let me give you two aspects that you didn't ask. One is going to a museum. You don't usually walk through the museum, think which paintings I want to buy. You just walk through and you say, oh, that is awesome. I've never seen that. I'd like to see that up close. So that's one point. The second point is the very first National had a museum feel to it as well. Even though there were no corporate sponsors, no graded cards, not even every dealer had showcases, but they had their wares. They had cards on the table where you could see them, you could pick them up. Those were simpler days, and it was like a museum. It was so exciting to go around and see cards, especially in those days, because regionals were a big deal. You were seeing cards from all over the country that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. It's one of the reasons I love going to Toronto. You'd see all the stuff from Canada that was, wow, I'd never seen this before. And the third point is, for most of my adult life now, when I've gone to the National, I was a price guide guy, a cataloger, and really trying to look for, not by value and not by aesthetics, but just trying to be comprehensive in terms of picking up type cards so that I could represent them in the almanacs and catalogs that we did. And so I cauterized my passion for buying. It's enough for me to just say, I want to see it. I want to be able to identify it. I want to be able to catalog it. And sure, I picked up a card or two along the way, but it wasn't like it was for my collection. I already had a lot of cards when I started doing this stuff. So I have plenty of fabulous cards. Actually, no one ever has enough, but I've got plenty. I've got plenty where when I go to the National, I can be happy for my friends that pick up stuff. I can be excited to go to the Heritage booth, which is not just a booth, it's a little small city where they have all these great display cases that are sparkling glass showing these museum quality artifacts. And in most cases are for sale in their upcoming auction. So I'm enjoying it that way. I don't go for the big fish anymore. I appreciate them. And when people show me what they picked up, I can ooh and ah with the best of them.